After I did a video about the Silent Hill movie, I got some comments warning me that the sequel was awful, so I did what any rational person would do and I bought a Blu-ray copy of it. You know when people tell you that something is bad and you're like, how bad can it really be though?
Where's Mommy?
Mommy saved you.
Turns out that the negative reviews of this movie are painfully accurate. So let's cut to the chase and pull this movie apart one scene at a time. We open on this girl Heather who's having a bad dream. She's at a carnival and there are these people in robes. This bunny jump scares us, but it's not very scary. There are these guys strung up on the carousel, and when you look at them, you're like, these guys are just wearing makeup. This is very clearly fake, and they're wearing bodysuits. Pyramid Head is operating the carousel, and it's sad to see that he's fallen on hard times. I mean, he used to be Silent Hill's most beloved villain. Now he's picking up side work as a ride operator at the local carnival. We meet this goth girl who's supposed to be Alessa from the first movie, even though she doesn't look like her at all. She shows up and tells Heather not to go to Silent Hill. Let's see how long it takes until the plot just forces Heather to go to Silent Hill. This scene does not look great, and the special effects have not aged well. She wakes up from the dream twice.
It was all a dream!
And now it's time for extreme confusion. Oh, and a Pop-Tart. The whole first half of this movie is basically recap and retcon for the first movie and everything that has happened since then. I'm not even sure if the screenwriter paid that much attention to the first movie. I get the sense that they read the first half of the Wikipedia article and then figured that they got the gist and then they wrote a sequel. Also, they brought back Sean Bean for this movie. He's playing the same character, Chris Da Silva, but they refer to him as Harry Mason for most of the film. And then the girl who everybody calls Heather Mason is actually Sharon Da Silva from the first movie. The names Harry and Heather Mason are a reference to the video game series, but the fact that these characters each have two names that are used interchangeably in the film makes things very confusing.
I was Sharon, then Mary, then Kathy, oh Heather.
Apparently even Sean Bean was confused, which that makes for great acting, right? When you confuse your actors.
Getting a little bit gray there, Dad.
And Heather acts like no teenager would ever act. What 18-year-old is so friendly and sitting on her dad's lap? It's so strange. So they do a flashback and Chris starts talking to a family photo. By the way, I think they had to get a different little girl to play Sharon in this photo. And then Rose is dialing in from the spirit realm to deliver some plot explanation. By the way, if you find yourself needing to spend a bunch of screen time having characters explaining the plot of your movie, maybe your script needs a rewrite. Just saying. Also, she calls him my love twice, which is just not in keeping with how Rose talks. The important information here is that Rose found a magic seal in Silent Hill. A seal like a round metal object, by the way, not the animal.
I found a seal.
And she used it to allow Sharon to escape from Silent Hill to the real world, but apparently she had to steal it from some people, and those people are going to come after Sharon. The seal, by the way, is a MacGuffin that they made up for this movie. It's just generically magic and can do whatever as long as it's convenient for forcing the plot along.
Mommy saved you.
Where's Mommy?
She's gone, honey.
Sean Bean is doing everything in his power to work with this dialogue, man, I swear. So Heather's going to school and there's this PI that recognizes her, but then she runs off to catch the bus. And the PI looks like Harrison Ford's D-list alcoholic cousin. So Heather is starting at a new high school and everything about this classroom scene is cringy. The popular girls make fun of her.
Do you get all of your clothes from Goodwill?
She delivers some speech that's unlike any 18-year-old would give because ooh, we want her to be different. She's not like other girls.
I won't IM you or Facebook you or tweet you, read your blog.
I'm not convinced that whoever wrote this remembers what being in high school is like. Anyways, her speech catches the attention of this guy who's also new, who's played by Kit Harington. I didn't recognize him at first, but then when he starts doing his little Jon Snow puppy dog face, it's unmistakable. There's a sequence where Heather starts having spooky visions in the school hallway. It's pretty uneventful. When she gets outside the school, she sees that the PI is still following her. But let me pause real quick to point out that this shot of the PI outside the school and this shot of the PI at the bus stop are the same shot, except that one of them is flipped and they added a freaking tree. It's funny, it's a $20 million production and they're flipping the frame and adding trees to reuse footage for some random pickup shot. Hey, I get it. Sometimes you need to fix it in post, but don't think I wouldn't notice. So Chris agrees to pick her up at the mall. Then Chris gets abducted right after he hangs up the phone. At the mall, Heather has another vision, and this scene is pretty bad. It feels like they're designing a $5 haunted house ride rather than making a $20 million feature film. They also just stretched the footage out here to make it extra scary, but it looks like something out of my Windows Movie Maker days. The PI eventually catches up with her and then tells her that he was hired by the Order of Valtiel to find her. That's something new that they introduced in this movie, the Order of Valtiel. It makes me cringe every time I say it, and I really think they should have gone with a different name. Oh, and they drop in the fact that Chris, aka Harry, killed a guy in Portland. So he finishes explaining the plot to us and then dies. And then Vincent, the other high school kid we met earlier, just happens to find her randomly at the mall and proceeds to follow her around like a lost puppy. And they do some bonding while riding on the bus together.
What's your favorite band? Do you Facebook? Nothing like that?
Fuck Facebook, do you?
I never think about it.
When Heather gets home, she gets this very subtle message to return to Silent Hill. Remember when I asked how long it was going to be until they forced her to go back to Silent Hill? Well, the answer is about 25 minutes. And then Vincent shows up again and agrees to drive Heather to Silent Hill. No red flags here, anyone? Vincent, this girl is talking about some crazy cult stuff and then shows you that she has a gun, and then you just agree to just drop whatever's going on in your life and drive her down to West Virginia? And Heather, you just met this guy today and you're just cool with getting in a car with him for an extended road trip? Doesn't it seem weird that he's just down for this with zero reservations? He's just some strange guy and you're also gonna split a hotel room with him? While they're traveling, they also slip in some super unnecessary backstory about how Silent Hill is built on an ancient burial ground. And then they try to make a joke about it, like, haha, we're so self-aware that this is a trope.
Never build on ancient Indian burial grounds. I thought everyone knew that.
Like, the joke isn't very funny, and if you know that it's a trope, just omit that part, please. When they're staying in the hotel, there's then this really weak reveal where Vincent tells Heather that he's part of the Order of Valtiel, and that they sent him here to bring her back to Silent Hill.
Because I am a child of the Order.
And then they have this exchange where they work really hard to plug up any plot holes that come to mind, but it just kind of comes off as ridiculous. Like, isn't the whole point that you can't leave Silent Hill?
It is possible for a few to escape just for a while.
Well, yeah, you can't leave Silent Hill unless it's convenient for the plot.
Then why not just take me?
Because you have to return of your own free will.
Why do I matter so much?
Because the Order can't be free until Alessa is gone, and she can't be destroyed until she is whole again. You need this. You have to find the other half. It's the only way you'll be able to save your dad.
So conveniently, after delivering this exposition, the darkness shows up and Vincent disappears. You see, in this movie, there are no people, only characters who explain the plot and then go away. Lock and load, baby. So the fog in this movie looks far worse than in the first. Some reviewers say that one of the few redeeming things about the first movie was that it had good visuals. In this one, it seems that they made the creative decision to have it look worse. By the way, they are still using plenty of footage from the first movie because I guess it saves them money. In Silent Hill, Heather encounters Dahlia, who we met in the first movie, and in this one they decided to get the same actress but to redo her costume and make it worse. So I saw clips of this scene before I watched the movie, and honestly I thought that I was seeing clips from a cheap remake of the first film. Like, this scene is just the crappy Walmart version of the conversation that Rose and Dahlia have in the first movie. So Dahlia finishes explaining that Heather, aka Sharon, and Alessa are two halves of the same person. Still a pretty confusing concept. And then she goes away when she's delivering that plot info. Are we seeing the trend here? Heather runs away when the darkness starts to come, and then we get a moment where they actually try to do something original. She winds up in the lair of this monster who turns people into mannequins. There's a naked lady laying on this table who we see get turned into a mannequin. Then Heather saves this girl who's stuck in some cling wrap. They run away from this mannequin spider monster, which in my opinion, not even that scary.
Where did you come from? We took a wrong turn. Got lost in the fog.
They have this small exchange where they're like trying to introduce this character who's certainly going to be a long-term character who we get to know over time, as most characters introduced past the halfway point tend to be. I get that they probably tried really hard on this monster, but it has zero impact on the story and it's only relevant in this one self-contained scene. So it feels like a huge miss that they put in a bunch of effort here at the expense of the rest of the film. Oh no, our favorite character who we just met doesn't make it? What a shame.
The arms of the angel.
Then we meet Vincent's mom, Claudia, who's this lady without eyebrows. She subtly drops that she's Cristobella's sister. Conveniently, they failed to mention her in the previous movie. Anyway, she calls Vincent a traitor and then sends him to an asylum. By the way, if Vincent was raised in Silent Hill with all this freaky darkness and torture stuff going on, how could he possibly be so well adjusted? Earlier, he's like, oh, you want to get a coffee?
Hey, look, you want to get a coffee?
Do they even have coffee in Silent Hill? How could you even pretend to be a normal teenager when you grew up in literal hell? What, was he sitting in Silent Hill just scrolling Facebook all day? Heather conveniently winds up at the asylum where she finds Vincent's grandfather, who has the other half of the seal. Vincent's grandfather is played by Malcolm McDowell, whose face I always recognize, but honestly I can never say for what. He's most well known for being the lead in A Clockwork Orange, but he's just like in so much other crap that I just can't help but know his face. So he grabs the other half of the medallion from Heather and shoves it in his chest like he's popping in a CD. Apparently the other half of the medallion was already inside his chest and he's joining them together to gain some kind of power. Then Heather blasts him with what has to be the strongest handgun in the world because it sends him flying back like he got hit by a truck. And yet it has a very modest recoil. So Grandpa turns into a big monster. But that's pretty short-lived because Heather just ends up taking the medallion out of his chest and he turns into dust. Again, we get to meet a character who tells us more about the plot and then disappears in a hurry. So Heather's running through the asylum and then Pyramid Head shows up and starts just cutting dudes' arms off at the asylum. Oh, I forgot to mention, the seal with the two halves joined together, it does have a name. Okay, it's called the Seal of Metatron. Metatron? It definitely sounds too much like Megatron. Oh, but what's that? Metatron is a name from the Bible. Oh, well, you know what else is a name from the Bible? Nimrod. Maybe not every biblical name works for naming stuff in your horror film, you know? Okay, so let's see. Vincent is taken to the asylum. These nurses who were in the first movie kill the orderlies. And for some reason, they have the nurses making these pornographic moaning noises, and it really adds nothing to the scene. Heather gets over the fact that Vincent was planning to sell her out, and she helps him escape, and they go to the amusement park to confront Vincent's mother and save Chris, aka Harry. At the amusement park, Vincent gives Heather a smooch because I guess the producers wanted a love story. And then Heather, aka Sharon, lives out the dream that she was having at the beginning of the film. So she finds Alessa on the carousel. And Alessa is just an extremely edgy teenager. And I think what they're going for here is that because Heather and Alessa are splits of the same person, that Alessa has all of the edginess that Heather should have. And that's why Heather is like a goody two-shoes who sits on her dad's lap. So they have a chat and Alessa keeps teleporting to different sides of Heather, which is what I do when I play Scorpion in Mortal Kombat. Then Heather gives Alessa a hug and that kind of solves everything for now. With one puff of unnecessary CGI smoke, they recombine back into one person. Then Heather confronts Vincent's mom, Claudia, in the dungeon below the amusement park where Vincent and Chris are being held prisoner. Claudia and the Order wanted to bring Heather back to Silent Hill so they could sacrifice her body and summon their god, which is roughly the plot of the first Silent Hill game, but this version of that story is just worse. Then Heather uses the Seal of Metatron, which turns Claudia into her true form, which is a monster with swords for hands and butthole eyes like Pete Davidson. Hey Vincent, that's your mom, bro. Then Pyramid Head shows up and they do an awkward and unexciting fight where, of course, Pyramid Head wins at the end. So everything's basically resolved now. Cut to the town where they're leaving and holy shit, it's Nathan Drugs. Hell yeah, Nathan Drugs making a reappearance. You'll love to see it. Chris decides to stay in Silent Hill so that he can look for Rose, who has been conveniently missing this whole time because I guess they couldn't get Rhoda Mitchell to be in this movie for any more than a brief cameo. Then Vincent and Heather catch a ride, who knows where they're going, and that's the movie. So I gotta say, bad horror movies, just really fun to watch. This one had me cracking up at some moments, and there are a few things that I wanted to come back to that I thought were funny. So this movie's really confusing because it's supposed to be a sequel, but they were just cherry picking what things they wanted to keep consistent with the first movie and what stuff they wanted to ignore because it didn't fit in with what they were trying to do. It reads like you asked someone who had seen the first movie like over a year ago to come up with a sequel on the spot without consulting any resources. Like the way that the stories match up isn't completely wrong in like a general sense, but the feeling, tone, and like details of the movie are completely off. And it felt so cheap that they used these shots from the first one and brought back creatures and set pieces. It felt like they were just doing it to save money. Like when they were figuring out the movie, they went down to the prop warehouse and were like, oh, we could dig up the old pyramid head costume, the nurse costume. Let's save some money so that we could spend more on the effects for this mannequin monster that nobody cares about. Also, what's the deal with Pyramid Head being a good guy now? I feel like that's just not his thing. It's like in the new Godzilla movies where they have him save a city even though he was the same guy who destroyed Tokyo all those years ago. So quite disappointingly, Pyramid Head is just like a glorified bodyguard in this movie, and that just feels wrong. They also threw in him making some weird animal noises. Combine that with like the porno nurse noises and you got some really interesting sound design for this movie. Okay, that's enough ranting for this one. The answer is no, by the way. I don't regret buying the Blu-ray because it meant that I got to see this train wreck in high resolution. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. See you in the next one, and until then, remember, if you're going on a road trip with a stranger from your high school, do some research and make sure that his mom isn't a monster with swords for hands.